Welcome back to the On Mission Together podcast. I am your host, Todd Unzicker, your NC Baptist Executive Director, coming to you live from the NC Baptist Studio here in Cary, North Carolina. Honestly, I got to just say, it's the best state. We're the third fastest growing. Everybody's figuring that out. Everybody's coming in. And if you notice, I'm a little bit even more excited than normal. It is because today's guest on the On Mission Together podcast is my good friend, Trevin Wax, who is the Vice President of Resource and Marketing Development for the North American Mission Board. He is a visiting professor at Cedarville University. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's been in the publishing. Trevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
We were just talking right before we started. We met about 14 years ago. We've worked together a lot over the last decade. Man, I am so glad that you are here at the NC Baptist headquarters here today and working with our staff and meeting with them. And you haven't been back in North Carolina often.
Yeah, no, actually not as much as I would have thought. I did my PhD at Southeastern,
right,
and have been here a couple times since. But I can't believe it's taken this long for me to get to the headquarters. So excited to be here.
Well, we are glad that you're here. And Trevin, I asked you ahead of time. There is really nobody that I probably listen to or glean from more of where is the culture? What are trends that are happening? What is good evangelism, thinking through evangelism and mission. Trevin, your podcast, Reconstructing Faith, has been instrumental in my life. I recommend it to everybody. In fact, if you're a listener to this podcast, I hope that you are subscribing and liking and doing all the things that you're supposed to do on that. But as soon as you get done listening to all of the back episodes of this one, you should go and check out Reconstructing Faith to talk about that. And I want to kind of get a lay of the land a little bit on this podcast. If our listeners, they want to reach the culture, what are some of the shifts that are impacting the way churches and Christians are doing ministry right now?
Yeah, I think the main one that I always tell pastors you got to be aware of is that one of the major stories that people live out of is this idea that the purpose of life is to find what makes you unique and then express that to the world. Be true to yourself, discover yourself, express yourself. The philosophers, the sociologists would call that expressive individualism. That is just in the air that we breathe. It's in the water. It's like and so the reason I tell pastors that that's one of the most important things to be aware of is because a lot of people, even church-going Christians, they come in with that mindset. And so they're coming in with the church, the mindset of the church is there to help me do that. Even their closest relationships are reconfigured around that. I get married because my spouse, my partner, is going to help me be the best version of myself, right? That's the whole purpose of marriage. It's the whole purpose of church. You be you, a purpose of church. And there's, of course, truth in that we are, that God does make us unique, that God does make us as individuals, that we have something unique to contribute, but it's the wrong story for that to get slotted in, and it winds up leading to profound loneliness, dissolution of relationships, superficial friendships. And so one of the things we see across the culture is in a secularizing kind of world where that is the dominant story. You've got the breakdown of relationships. You have a serious. One of the good things about it is there is an openness to the gospel, but we got to be able to get through the ways in which you got to break through the ways in which expressive individualism kind of puts this sort of facade around the gospel to actually get to the true gospel with people, to where they realize when we're sharing the gospel, when we're sharing our faith, we're not in the realm of my truth and your truth. We're not simply saying, hey, adopt this spiritual religious hobby that's going to help you be a better you. We are actually talking about Jesus Christ and him crucified and raised, and that he's the center of all things. And so we've got to get past some of those hurdles in order for the real gospel to be heard, so that it'll be heard as the good news that it is.
Okay, so I want to, this was not what I told you I was going to ask, but I think this is helpful in this expressive individualism. I'm a pastor listening to this podcast. I'm a Christian who's, in a Sunday school, and I'm working, I'm a teacher, I'm a plumber, or whatever I'm doing. What's a practical tool, knowing that ahead of time? Like, I bet you our listeners are like, oh, that makes sense. What would you encourage them in starting today to think through to be more effective salt and light?
Yeah, I mean, the first place I'd start is with church members, because I think practically speaking, we can start with the idea of, oh, what are the hurdles I got to do to be able to share the gospel outside the church? But one of the challenges that we face is that a lot of the people that are already coming to our congregations may have a view of sin and redemption that is more influenced by this than we realize. And so in our preaching and our teaching, practically in our counseling, in our shepherding, in our small groups, we've got to be able to distinguish, almost take this sort of "you have heard it said, but I say to you" approach in our preaching, teaching, and whatnot, because people are going to hear us, and they're going to take whatever we say, and they're going to filter it through the way they already see the world. So, quick case in point: you can teach about the abundant life that we see in John. What's promised by Jesus. Right. Well, if you don't really define that, you could be speaking a different language than the people in your congregation. You may be thinking of the abundant life as that rich, amazing life with Jesus that is going to include suffering and trials, and the abundant life that even leads, I think of the ancient martyrs into the Colosseum, kind of an abundant life. Whereas the abundant life, if it's not defined well in your congregation when you're teaching on this, is going to be basically the American dream with a little bit of Christianity sprinkled on top, like Jesus making my life better, rather than the reality that Jesus actually can complicate your life. You make things more difficult. So unless you really explain that deeper joy with that source of abundant life, my point is, in your preaching, in your teaching, in your counseling, people are going to hear the same words that you're speaking, and you may be saying something totally biblically true. And they're going to take that, and they're going to interpret it through the lens of the kind of worldview they're already bringing. And so I guess just practically speaking, it's important to get a handle on that, so that you're actually breaking through the defenses of people to bring them to the true Jesus, right? Where that's best for us.
So as we're thinking about the culture, in my 21 years of being a Christian, I feel like there's kind of two camps, right? There's the camp that says we're going to need to war against the culture. All culture is bad. Let's be culture warriors. Then there's another side that, for those of us who lived overseas, you did, I did, that is really culture heavy. I mean, most of our mission agencies, and they train you in the culture, and you need to learn language and custom and all of that to be a more effective witness. I like what you're kind of been talking about here, is because what advice would you give for us in engaging this expressive, individualistic culture? Like, how should we as Christians start really thinking the culture? Not Scripture doesn't change, we're not watering down something, but being more effective in the culture.
Yeah, I think there's a third way of looking at this than just the two you laid out. There's the sort of against the culture approach. Ironically, sometimes those are the most culturally engaged people in the political sphere, right? Because they see that as like the battleground that is going to culture is downstream from politics rather than politics being downstream from culture. And the reality is, it's like they're always working together. The waves are always influencing each other. But so you have that side. You do have the missiological side, like we were talking about, the missionary. And I'm going to be more on that side. But the thing I'd want to just interject into that is to bring to the surface the reality that the church is itself a culture. So it's not simply, what posture should we have toward the culture? It's that we should recognize that the church in itself is itself supposed to be a counterculture, a culture that is influencing the culture around it. But we can't influence the culture around us if the church itself doesn't have a distinctive culture itself. Like before we can talk about taking back the culture or reaching the culture, we have to ask the question, are we different enough in the church as a culture to really have anything? Otherwise, we wind up with a missionary force that's actually not making much of a difference because it's sort of assimilating way too fast, or with a fortress mentality, like a bunker mentality, where you have the outer facade of a Christian culture, but inside it's completely hollowed out by expressive individualism. Neither one of those I don't think we want. I think we want the church in its fullness, making a difference in the culture. So that's, from a posture standpoint, that's why I said when it comes to evangelism, I switch the conversation back to, first of all, the church and the community we have, because unless we stand out as a community of believers, unless the family of God looks different than people who are outside the family of God, we don't really have something we're inviting people into. And I love Leslie Newbegin's quote. You've probably heard it before, but the church is the hermeneutic of the gospel. The church is, Mark Dever says the church is the gospel made visible. I do think we've got to have that powerful counterculture to invite people into so that they can actually see and taste and feel what is missing in life in the world.
I don't know about you. Some people call it revival. They're seeing lots of things happen. I kind of use I think we're in a moment. I don't know if I stole that from you or read it from somebody else, but we are seeing a lot of movement here in North Carolina. Just in Q2 of churches that reported into us, we saw nearly 300 baptisms. That is huge. We saw that there are sending labs of reproducing. International and Hispanic churches here in our state have launched. There were over 1,800 baptisms reported on Fill the Tank Sunday. Just one day alone. And North Carolina's population is expected to be 12.2 million by 2035. So inside 10 years from now, that's about double where it was even 15 years ago. What should I know we're talking about North Carolina. We have listeners all over. I would encourage people to study this in their own context. But what would you encourage North Carolina Baptists in seeking to understand and reach their mission field specifically with this ever-changing tide that's coming in?
Oh, the main thing I would just say is people are way more open than you think. I was just talking with a couple of 20-somethings just fresh out of college just a couple of weeks ago in Tennessee. And basically, we're agnostic but really open, One of them had a Christian background. The other one kind of didn't, but was interested in all sorts of stuff. And we were talking through also, and the other, so the spiritual openness is there more than you realize. The openness to spiritual conversations is there. The second thing that I would just encourage people to realize is if we're talking about the harvest being ripe, the fields being ripe for harvest, the second thing I would say is not just that people are open, but that the entryways into conversation are mind-blowing. It's you used to, in the days of formulaic evangelism, we kind of had hey, let's kind of shift the conversation to, if you died tonight, where would you stood before God, or the heaven.
Why do we think people only die at night too, by the way?
That's right. That's true. Died today, died this hour. I don't know. Maybe it's because they're thinking it's the last day on earth.
Right.
But if you think about those ways, it was a way of gently nudging the conversation in a direction to where this is a door that a lot of people can enter in because they think about eternal things. What I'm just saying is there's just so many doors right now. And that's exciting to me. There's so many doors that people are, Jesus is the only way, but there are a million ways to come to Jesus, right? And so there are all these different ways to him, whether it's talking about, whether it's the loneliness crisis and talk about the church in terms of family, or whether it's coming in it because Western civilization needs is losing its sense of meaning and significance, and what's going to revive the world that we're living in, or whether it's people coming in through the door of the paranormal, or of aliens, conversation about aliens that suddenly leads UFOs leads suddenly to spiritual entities, to are there forces that we can't see? Where does that intersect with angels and demons? There's so many conversations right now, and some of it's a little weird and off-putting, and sometimes Christians may not know, we're not familiar with that door, The sexuality conversation is a door, actually, which a lot of people would say, oh, that's the big obstacle to Christianity. Actually, the sexual sanity that the church has on offer is that way of living, that way of understanding who we are as embodied creatures. That's a door. So there are all these doors in which people are coming. And so I just would encourage pastors, start conversations and listen well. Don't come with the formulas yet. Listen well. Invite people to church. Expect people to respect you, even if they disagree with you, because more and more I see that is also a thing. And then just be ready to open and walk people through doors, whatever door they're coming at.
Yeah. My first pastor was Brother Bill Ricketts, Prince Avenue Baptist. He spent 43 years there, and he said something to me about 20 years ago. He said, I like to start every day by praying that the Holy Spirit would fill me and give me boldness with the lost people around me.
Wow.
And that's kind of what you're reminding me of, that truth of a generation before us. That's kind of what he was saying, was looking for those opportunities, and those opportunities are bigger than ever before.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears just a second because you and our friend Thomas West, who is an NC Baptist, served here a long time, spent time over in Europe, and now he is back at First Baptist Nashville. You guys co-authored a book, The Gospel Way Catechism, and I know that there's some that's a resource and some parallels to what we were just talking about. But before we dive into that, I think catechism is a word that many of our listeners will be like, I've heard of that, but that's not a normal word that we use in, say, evangelical or even specifically Baptist life. How would you define that?
It's a discipleship tool that uses question and answer format in order to present the truth of Christianity in a very concise way. Simply speaking, it means instruction. That's what it is, but it's an ancient discipleship tool. So the early church was using this in the first centuries of the church. Before baptism, they were training people as to what it is that you confess. There was an explosion of catechisms in the Reformational period, in part to push back against some of the excesses of medieval Roman Catholicism. And both Thomas and I are we both had this burden several years ago of we need more catechism type resources where you present the basics of Christianity in a question and answer format. And we wanted, though, there to be that countercultural element to it. That's one of the things, Thomas very influenced both of us, but he did his doctoral work on Leslie Newbigin, the missionary theologian. And I was very influenced by Tim Keller, who talked about this in the last years of his life, this need for counter catechesis, a sort of a not this but that element. You've heard that the world says this, but Jesus says that. And so that was really what led us to put this together. We really want it to be a sharp discipleship tool. And the catechism word, we played around with other ways of like calling it something else. At the end of the day, the ancient word is part of the attraction to it, I think, is that, you're picking up a tool. It may be a newer tool, right, but the method is really old.
Right.
And I think that, it's one that we need to dust off and make sure is in the toolbox.
Well, for our listeners, I get nothing for this. In fact, I bought my own copy because my good friend Trevin Wax was too cheap and didn't send me a copy.
I'm going to blame this on Thomas.
Oh, okay.
He's my co-author. I get to blame my co-author.
Well, Thomas is not
Thomas should
here.
have sent it.
Thomas should have sent it. Yes,
Sure.
a sent one from NC Baptist. He should have sent it to us. But I'm looking forward to diving into this tool, as what I hear you saying is making sure that we have a real gospel culture as a church that is influential in a greater culture is what I hear you saying. Trevin, thanks. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for being on with us on the On Mission Together podcast. We really want all of our listeners to not only pick up the Gospel Way Catechism, but really engage the culture. Ask the Lord, ask the Holy Spirit to fill you today and to put lost people in your path and to give you boldness in preaching truth that is in love. And so, Trevin, thank you for what you're doing and what you have been doing. And you're a great friend to NC Baptist and a resource for all of us. And so we are grateful. You can check out the show notes on this podcast because I know there's going to be a ton of them and all the helpful resources. And you can listen to more episodes at ncbaptist.org/podcast. I'm Todd Unzicker. Thanks for joining us on the On Mission Together podcast.
When you give to the North Carolina Missions Offering, you're helping change lives. By supporting the work of church planting, Baptists on Mission, and local associations. Through church planting, you're helping people experience the love of Jesus, often for the very first time. The North Carolina Missions Offering is helping plant churches everywhere for everyone. The 19 different ministries of Baptists on Mission help meet physical and spiritual needs of hurting people through the work of disaster relief, rebuild facilities, mobile, dental, and health screening units, missions mobilization, and more. Gifts to the offering also support mission projects in your community through local Baptist associations. The North Carolina Missions Offering is a way for you to help others experience the love of a personal Savior.
Thank you for joining us today. Because of your generosity to NC Baptist, this podcast, along with other helpful resources, are made available for you. Learn more by visiting ncbaptist.org/give.